the sole goal of the team is to mitigate the failure, whatever it is, and restore service as quickly and as fully as possible. As a service provider, I should prioritize recovering quickly when I do fail, as opposed to trying to prevent all failures. Failure happens. And so to the extent that we have limited resources to put on it, we should spend those resources on how can I get things back? Instead of a day, how about an hour? Instead of an hour, how about 10 minutes? Instead of 10 minutes, how about 1 minute? You're much better off having 10 1-minute outages, if you see what I mean, than one 1 hour outage.
This podcast is hosted by Cortex.io. We help engineering leaders build orgs that ship reliable software faster with AI. Check out the link in the description and see how we've helped our customers cut their MTTR in half, double their deploy frequency, and save thousands of engineering hours with golden paths and the right guardrails. Thanks for listening to Braintrust, a podcast for engineering leaders by engineering leaders. Hello, welcome to the Braintrust podcast. I'm Ganesh. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Cortex. We help engineering organizations create a culture of reliability through things like scorecards and self-service workflows. Today, I have on Randy, who is currently the SVP of Engineering at Thrive Markets. Great to have you on.
Great. Yeah, I'm Randy Shoup. I'm the SVP of Engineering at Thrive Market, as you said. I think we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff today, but I used to be VP of Engineering for a platform at eBay and the chief architect, and I've been an individual contributor for a lot of my career, worked at Google, eBay, Stitch Fix, WeWork, a whole bunch of places, sometimes as individual contributors and then most recently as engineering leader. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Very excited to have you on. I think, like you described, having been in IC for such a long time and then engineering leadership roles for such a long time, I think you've seen the full end of the spectrum, and I think you bring a very interesting perspective. I want to maybe start off way back when in the early days. And you have talked about in the past that engineering organizations, especially legacy organizations, sometimes have a resistance to measurement. And we all know you can't improve what you don't measure, but sometimes there's a reluctance to say, like, maybe we don't want to know what's wrong. Is that true? Where does that come from? And how do you coach an organization out of that mindset?
Yeah, wow. Well, you just described exactly my saga of the Velocity Initiative at eBay as chief architect. So yeah, it is not so much legacy, not legacy, but it is Ron Westrom, who is a sociologist emeritus, has this great framing of organizational culture where he talks about three different kinds, a typology of cultures. This is in all the DevOps literature. So he talks about pathological cultures, which are cultures of fear and threat, where novelty is crushed, you shoot the messenger, people live in fear, right? They're fear for their jobs or for their reputations or whatever. And that engenders a lot of resistance to change and so on. And we'll talk about more about that. That's the answer to your question. There are other kinds of organizations, two others, bureaucratic, where it's all about rules and standards, and we do it this way because we've always done it this way. And those tend to be very rigid, but middling in their output in terms of engineering outcomes, but also middling in terms of their business outcomes. By the way, as you can imagine, pathological has like the worst engineering and the worst business outcomes. Read the Accelerate book to understand why. The third one is the generative culture, which is a culture of performance, of like theory Y versus theory X, like a culture of when there's a failure, it generates inquiry. You're looking to improve, and there's a culture of improvement and learning. So to answer your question about, is it often true that legacy organizations resist measurement? Yes, but I think it's not that's not their step one. It's that they resist. This is particularly true at eBay, but in lots of other similar pathological organizations, there is a culture of fear, and therefore shining a light on what the current situation is in my team is threatening to me. Because again, I'm in constant fear of being embarrassed or maybe even let go or something like that. And so if I were an adaptive reaction, unfortunately, in such a culture of fear is to be very risk averse and also very anti-transparent, right? Very non-transparent. And I think you also asked, like, isn't that a challenge for making change? Like, oh yeah, it's a big challenge for making change. And so one of the real challenges that my partner Mark Weinberg and I had in terms of in doing this velocity initiative, I'll talk about what we're trying to do maybe in a moment. But for the moment, we're trying to make change across the entire 5,000 engineering organization. And one of the first things we were doing with the teams that we were working with was trying to up their psychological safety, or conversely reduce their fear of, hey, here are these two fancy people coming in, digging in my area and trying to help me be better. And we just want you to be better. And again, to your point, the only way to get better is to be very open and honest and straightforward with yourself and others about where you currently are. And by the way, I know you know this, but like that's just not just true in engineering organizations, like with your health, with your diet, with your relationships, with your personal, I don't know, psychology or whatever, right? Like all these things are like, there's no way to get better until we are this is feeling very Zen, because it really is, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a very much like Eastern philosophy idea of let's deeply understand and be centered and understand the world the way it is, and then and only then can we move forward.
I love that. There's I think it was either Andreessen or Horowitz who had said something like, as leaders or as founders, like your hardest job is to run towards uncomfortable truths, like, and that's what makes great leadership, is like you have to face those things head on, and like avoiding them is like the challenge. And I think it's probably very similar where organizations maybe don't want to face that truth, like they don't want to really know what's going on because maybe the status quo is okay. And we see that even in organizations that maybe I wouldn't describe as pathological in our own customers, but there's like a perception. They're worried about the perception of introducing metrics. They're like, if we measure things, people may think that we're going to use it for all these other reasons. Even if that perception is actually not there, there's a fear that it will create fear. And like, it's like they see how that might be perceived. And so if you're an engineering leader, or even like, somebody working in engineering operations or developer productivity, how do you introduce this concept like into an organization like that, where like, hey, we are measuring this not for that purpose? Like, is there a way to broach the subject or introduce it in a way that's psychologically safe?
Yeah, that's very insightful. Just I'll say back the premise, which I agree with, and then we'll go forward from there. So I was saying, in a pathological organization, I fear transparency because I don't want people to see what's happening. Or I fear what would happen if they did. You are also noting, even in the opposite kind of organization, in a generative organization, one correctly might expect that, hey, when we introduce measurement, are people going to feel like we're going to use the measurement for evil? And that is a real fear. Those are two different things. That's obviously, I know you know that, but just like we had both those fears. So your question was like, how do you deal with it? I mean, I don't think there's any magic, but it really comes down to trust, right? The Velocity Initiative that I'm going to keep referencing in this conversation, 2020, I returned to eBay as the chief architect. Problem statement was eBay's product development and engineering is too slow versus other industry, peers, and we should be faster. And so we leveraged the DORA metrics, or the accelerate, call them the same thing, the four key metrics. Use that as our measure of software delivery. And so we were doing exactly what you're asking about, which is we were coming to teams trying. I mean, the hope and the goal was make everybody better, and like everybody wanted that. But to your point, there was a fear that, hey, we're going to measure, this chief architect and other fancy folks are coming and measuring things, and is that going to be a problem? Or is it going to be used for evil? The best way to demonstrate trust is to start by being vulnerable a little bit. Like, we're coming in and again, being straightforward about that. Like, hi, we are introducing these metrics. Here's why we're doing it. And also, we completely understand that it's going to freak you out, right? And just being, and so demonstrate, so building the trust, and it takes time, as it should. The whole point of measuring the teams was to make them better. Not to compare them or to make them feel bad, but like, your team is 5 units of whatever, and we want it to be 20 units of whatever. And like, there's no way you can get to 20 without recognizing that you're 5. And so the way that we specifically did that was we did it very transparently. So we had a dashboard that you could drill in and look at every team and how they were performing on all the DORA metrics, plus a bunch of other things that we did. But then also we met every week with every team we were working with. And we didn't try to work with all 5,000 at a time. We had some pilot teams to start with, but we met every week with them. That was both to get their feedback about what we as the platform team could do better for them, what things they were actively struggling with. Like, okay, you tried a bunch of things this past week. What went well, what went poorly? But also, exactly to your point, how can we, this is my words, how can we tamp down your anxiety that we're going to do this for evil? Like, it's like, I'm here to help, right? And like, people have to, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And people have to actually believe that. And you have to believe that, in order for them to believe that, you have to demonstrate that that's true, if that makes any sense, right? So like, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess my last question on this note, do you think that every team should be able to see every team's metrics? And the reason I ask that is because I think, again, from a cultural standpoint, sometimes you have folks who are strong believers of like, hey, we only want managers to be able to see this, and that will help prevent a culture where like, hey, we're using this to measure you or like stack rank people or whatnot. Yeah, I believe sometimes that like, hey, by opening it up to everyone, we treat it like observability. It's like, these are the facts. Like, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is, and we should all look at it. I don't know if you have an opinion on.
No, I mean, I have your opinion. Both these, we're adults, which means we have to be able to hold seemingly contradictory ideas in our head. And one of those ideas is we should have full transparency, and everybody should be able to see and be inspired by what other teams are doing. And the other thing we need to hold in our head is that will freak some people out. And so the trick is and it's exactly this cultural thing of like slowly but surely trying to move from a pathological fear-based model to a generative, like performance-based model. And yeah, I mean, what we did is this had never been done before, but yeah, every team could see every other team. And what we did not do is go, hey, team with the old legacy stuff, you have 2 units of goodness, and this team with all the new stuff has 20 units, and aren't they great and you terrible? It's like, no. The way to think about it, honestly, is less a comparison between teams and more a comparison within a team over time. A point very well made by Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who's the primary author of Accelerate and all of the DevOps related research. But she and Abhinoda just came out with a book like a month ago called Frictionless, which I happen to have on the top of my book stack. And it talks about how to execute these kinds of transformations. And one of the great points they make is exactly this: is don't compare team A to team B, but compare team A to team A minus one. I don't know how to say it, like team A minus minus, what they were, last week, last month, last quarter. The thing I would add to that, again, is, the side of seeing, there's the fear comes from, aren't I going to be compared with these other teams, and won't I sometimes look bad if I'm not the best? Like, okay, that's a real fear that people have, but that's what leadership is there to do. But the other thing, frankly, which is the flip side of it, is, hey, I get inspired by these other teams, right? And I guess the other mechanism, sorry to go back to your earlier question, but I think it relates. The other mechanism that we did, I thought that was very effective in this velocity transformation, was that we had a weekly team of teams meeting, or scrum of scrums, if you like. And it was like at least one member from all of the teams that we were working with. So 10 or 15 individual teams. And that hour was like all rah. And it was like, hey, you guys went from 10 to 12. These people over here went from 20 to 30. What did you guys all do? Oh, well, we did this, and we put this tool into practice, and we changed the way we did our stand-ups, and this, and so teams inspiring each other and just watching other folks be better. It sets up a friendly competition, and like, that's not a euphemism, like genuinely a friendly competition, as distinct from people feeling bad. So You asked the question about transparency. I think we want to live in a world where transparency is a net good and we use it for good. And the only way to start doing that is to just do it. And again, initially people will feel uncomfortable. I get it. There's nothing weird about that. Again, two contradictory ideas in our head. But by not using it for evil, we demonstrate that it's being used for good, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like the idea of maybe if you're doing a thing that can be construed as negative, counterbalancing that with the ritual that errs on the side of positivity, like the rah-rah meeting or whatever you want to call it. It's like,
I mean, we didn't even, I mean, we called it the Team of Teams, and there's a book called Team of Teams, and we were very much inspired by that book. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that we were, I guess it makes it sound like it was more intentional on my part than it was, but so thank you for that credit. But it was our intuition, and it turned out to be correct, that by collectively having teams be able to say openly that they were struggling with something, and that engendered, hey, how can my team help you, as distinct from you're terrible, and having everybody see that. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, you haven't really made this much forward progress as I think you wanted to. What can my team do like tomorrow to help you? And like, it's like failure generates inquiry. It's like opportunities or challenges or impediments, as we used to call them, generate help.
And it's assuming good intent. It's like most of the time your developers are not like trying to be slow on purpose. You know, it's like most developers are craftspeople. Like most of them want to ship and do good work. And it's
I would replace most with all. I mean, there are people in the world that have bad intent. That's why we have to have security. But I have yet to find, I mean, like, I could have done this in an hour, but I intentionally he took 10. Like, said no developer ever, right? The reason why it takes 10 is the system, not the individual. And and the other thing to be said very strongly, and you kind of implied it in your question, but I'll say it explicitly, none of these things should be used to measure individuals. The unit of measurement is the team. Full stop, end of story. Yeah. There is not value in measuring deployment frequency, lead time, certainly change failure rate or MTTR for an individual. That doesn't tell you anything, and does create would engender a culture of fear. And so it's not about stack ranking. Nothing should be about stack ranking people, but it's definitely not about stack ranking individuals. The unit of production of value is the team. And that's the correct unit to measure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to zoom out now. We've obviously been talking about visibility and measuring things. And one of the things we tend to measure is things like incidents and uptime and reliability and things like that. And you've talked in the past about, this idea that incidents are normal, like software fails, like things break.
Yeah.
Shit happens, to put it another way. But what matters is, how well you recover from that. Could you expand on that a little bit? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's great. I would say there are two things that you want out of incidents. In the incident, you want to recover as fast as possible, and I'll put more behind that. And then also, John Allspaw, who's wonderful in this area, says incidents are unplanned investments. Like, we've already paid the cost, right? In the downtime, like the customers have already paid. So the only way to get an ROI for that is to get some R. Well, we paid the I, so what's the R? The R is the learning. The R is, here are the action items that we're going to do next, to make sure it never happens again, to make sure we're more reliable, and so on. Yeah, so maybe direct me a little bit into what you wanted to dig into.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, like, why is the focus about recovery? Like, why does it matter how well you recover?
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so think about yourself as the customer of some service, like electricity. And that's relevant to me because in the 2 weeks of rain we had over Christmas, I lost power in my house twice. So what I want out of the power company is that they restore my service as quickly as possible. And that is what they should want too. So when you are in an incident, and I've done it for 38 years, once upon a time I had hair, the sole goal of the team is to mitigate the failure, whatever it is, and restore service as quickly and as fully as possible. Sometimes you can remediate. That's even better. But like our immediate goal is how can we mitigate and restore service as rapidly as possible? And sometimes, depending on what the failure is, sometimes it's like, okay, spin up more capacity. Sometimes it's move to some other place in the world. Sometimes it's pull the plug out and restart it, reboot it or whatever. Those have been the solutions to many of the, those are specific solutions to specific incidents I have in the back of my head. But yeah, that's because, again, you're providing a service to your customers, whether they're other teams that at your current company or the customers of your company. Like, it doesn't matter. The goal is to restore service. And after that, only then can you restore service as quickly as possible. And so a lot of times that can be something like, again, hey, let's spin up in a new region, double the capacity, and just go. I'm like, okay, great. Now we have time to breathe. And now we need to figure out what to do next. And maybe that's not sustainable. And again, this is very obvious, but the analogy to triage in an emergency room is exactly this. We're like, stabilize the patient and do whatever you need to do to get the patient in a stable state. Then the doctors and nurses take a step back and go, all right, what's the like proper long-term way to solve whatever they have, right? Stop the bleeding. And then and only then we go, okay, now we have to do this particular operation or whatever. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think it's a very pragmatic take, because I think you have to accept that things will break in real life, and things happen.
Yeah.
And, even in your electricity case, like, you cannot prevent a tree from falling on a wire somewhere.
Oh, that's where you were going. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I was.
No. I think you answered it exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, let me answer what you're actually. I mean, like, I answered part of it, but not fully. What you were really asking me is, as a service provider, should I prioritize trying not to fail, or should I prioritize recovering quickly when I do fail? And yes, the answer is I should prioritize recovering quickly when I do fail, as opposed to trying to prevent all failures. And that is why, of the 4 metrics, we do not measure MTBF, mean time between failures. We don't measure how long has it been since the last serious, 1 day since serious industrial accident or whatever. Instead, we measure MTTR, mean time to recover. There's some quibbles in the world about whether that's a good metric, but let's leave it there for the moment. No one argues in a serious way that it is. Everybody argues that recovery is more important. And again, to your point, we would love to not have failure, but failure happens. And so, to the extent that we have limited resources to put on it, which we typically do, we should spend those resources on how can I get things back instead of an hour, instead of a day, how about an hour? Instead of an hour, how about 10 minutes? Instead of 10 minutes, how about 1 minute? And you're much better off having 10 1-minute outages, if you see what I mean, than one 1 hour outage. So yeah, prioritizing the recovery is absolutely what essentially all of these kinds of this discipline's called resilience engineering. And again, it applies to airline safety, it applies to medicine, it applies to software, it applies to fire, all these kinds of things. And like, everybody has come to independently invented, don't blame the people, have a retro, prioritize stabilizing the patient, blah, 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 right? Like, I mean, all these different domains that need to be resilient to stuff, all independently, discover essentially the same thing.
Yeah. And I think like that's where SLOs come in, obviously, because you want to be able to define like an acceptable level of fine. Because I think that's like an easy way to counterbalance. Like, yeah, should I be prioritizing being up or recovering from failure? Well, you can get a more nuanced answer maybe if you've also spent the time to define, well, what is acceptable to my customers in terms of like quote unquote reliability of the platform.
Yeah.
Obviously, a recovery like helps meet your SLO targets and stuff as well, but it's maybe an input into this broader equation.
Yeah. What you're seeing on my face is thinking about it. So I agree with everything you say about SLOs. I guess I wouldn't immediately tie it only to recovery time. I think you should prioritize recovery. Totally independent of that, how is our system doing? Are we meeting the service demands, requirements, requests, desires of our customers? And to your point, a lot of times we're a little hand wavy about it, and much better is to be disciplined and structured and quantitative about it. And yeah, SLOs are just is doing a lot of work here, but like they are just a way of us taking a step back and saying, what does a good customer experience look like? Or maybe more precisely, what is the minimum accepted customer experience that we would feel proud about?
Yeah. And that might help you balance, like, should I invest in the like quality of the service? Or because in the electricity example, if your electricity was going out every day, you might say, I don't care that it takes you 5 seconds to get my electricity back. Just stop, like, keep my power on for like a good amount of time and then go figure out how you're going to fix it.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, again, that's, I haven't done this, but like I've considered more than once doing battery backup and, exactly for that reason. Yeah. My community is actually discussing actively, should we spin up a little local solar
there you go.
battery station essentially for our little community because we can't trust PG&E to keep the lights on or whatever. Anyway, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that's very visceral and very, very evocative for people. Like if you think about it, like I need the electricity, right? So what would you want of the power company? Like, and that's what we're supposed to do essentially as service providers and software.
Exactly. I would love to talk a little bit about how to create a culture around this, like this culture of reliability, the culture where an organization is willing to take a step back and say, hey, we are going to go back and think about the root cause or what the investment is, and not just like run back to the next ticket or whatever that might be. Like, how do you foster this culture of reliability? Is it people? Is it management? Is it systems? Like, what goes into that?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, in no particular. So what I meant was, it is people and culture, it is organization, it is technology, it is systems, it is all those things. You asked how to foster it, implying that when it doesn't exist, how do we get it the first time? And actually, I'm kind of in that situation at Thrive Market, so like it's very, very visceral for me, and have been at other places as well. Interestingly, it's back to your first question. Step one is actually measure. And you measure, of course, because that is the way to figure out whether you've made improvements or not. But also, interestingly, the best first step to generating a culture of caring about a thing is to start measuring that thing. And again, being transparent about the measurement. I have found that kind of 80% of the battle of like, this is not your question, but it's similar. Like, how can we get engineering teams to care about cloud costs? Well, a way to do it is to, I don't know, get mad at them and punish them. But 80% of the way there, you can just go with like, here are your cloud costs, right? Like, I mean, no joke.
Literally, we've seen this.
Literally, like here are your, and like, I'm one of these people, and there are many like me. Like, are you kidding me? $50 million? No way. I can make that 40 million, 30 million, right? Like, there's something about humans in general, but engineers in particular, that look at something like that and we're go like, there's no way we do 10 million API requests for that thing that, and then like, oh, it is. Okay, but that's really inefficient and blah, blah, blah. So like simply making it transparent is step one to the culture. And then step two, or related step, is what does the organization incentivize? And you can incentivize something in a negative or a positive way. And the longer term is the positive way, like celebrating the teams or the services or whatever you're measuring that have improved their, SLOs or their measurements or whatever, right? Like incentivizing it through positive reinforcement of the good behaviors as distinct from the culture of fear or pathological of like negatively reinforcing the other ones. There, you need a little bit of the stick sometimes, but rarely. The sustainable cultures come from the carrot side. And then the other way to do it, or the other related way to do it, and this is true of bugs or compiler warnings or tests or performance SLOs, where like you start at a particular level that you give yourself a target that's achievable. And I think of it as a ratchet. So like, okay, we get to this point and we like set the SLO at this point, and then we do that and we're very happy with that. Like, okay, now let's raise it or lower it or whatever's the appropriate thing. Like make it more challenging. And then do that for a while and then make it more challenging, So like that's particularly true with tests and quality, where like I like to think of it as like a ratchet, where like every time, we have a bug that somehow slipped through our test because we didn't test for it or whatever. Okay, great. We write a test to that reproduces the bug. We put that in our suite. We fix the bug. All good. The ratchet moves forward. Chunk, right? Okay, we're never going to have that one again, or at least if we have it, we'll detect it early rather than late. All of these improvement things, like you can kind of think of in that way, right? You just like, what is a mechanism that I could put in place so that we would never slip back? Like we're at some point and then we like move forward, and then how does it not slip back? And SLOs are a way to do it. Tests are a way to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we see that in practice with our customers. We have a product called Scorecards, which is basically allows you to define best practices. Like production readiness is a great example of this. Like here are all the things that we consider to be part of a production ready service, monitors and SLOs and all these things. And what we see in practice from our most successful customers is it's gamified. So people generally do like levels. They do like bronze, silver, and gold or whatever. And like services meet those standards. But eventually over time, the stuff that's in gold moves down to silver, moves down to bronze. Like as more and more teams accomplish those things, it's like, hey, we're all doing those things that we considered aspirational one day, but like these are now the basics. And so it's holding ourselves to that higher standard. So we kind of see that play out across disciplines as well.
I love that. You say gamified, I say positively reinforced. And like we're saying the same thing, right? Yeah. Like that's a specific implementation, which actually works really well for human psychology. Of like, what you're not saying is like the bronze people are terrible and they're fired. What you're saying is there's bronze and there's silver, gold, I don't know, that platinum, right? Diamond, whatever the credit card companies want to keep doing, black. Anyway, but that's a really, really good way of quantifying and making tangible positive reinforcement for good work.
And then celebrating it, like you said, like calling out those teams. An advisor make a great analogy the other day, which was like, you want to create a culture of celebrating the first downs, not just the touchdowns. And I was like, yeah, it's a really good way of describing it.
Really good. Yeah, it's really good. All these things are games of inches anyway. I mean, genuinely.
Yeah, exactly.
There are very few examples in the world of one shot, order of magnitude improvement. Like everything that I'm really proud of, it's actually true. Every single thing that I've done that I'm really, really proud of in my career has all been these like tiny little game of inches. And this velocity improvement at eBay, where we doubled engineering productivity, that's one of them. Earlier in my career at eBay, doing something entirely different, it was improving the ranking function for the search engine and like driving like hundreds of millions of dollars additional revenue. Similarly, improving the performance of the search pages, again, driving hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And every one of those was like, there wasn't one, smoking gun, no silver bullet. It was just simply a game of inches, like a game, making a small improvement here, a small improvement there, a small improvement here, ratchet. And that's maybe, I think, the only way really to get serious improvement. I'm going to pontificate for one more second, and then I'll let you ask your next question. This is exactly Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, if you've ever heard of that book.
I haven't read it. I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's the 10,000 hours, it's where the 10,000 hours to become an expert comes from. I mean, the idea is very quick, which is all world-class experts, or at least youth experts, come from deliberate practice and constant improvement in the small, right? There's no concept of like step change. There's only reinforce, improve. And that's the way you get to greatness. So
I love that. I mean, think about it another way. It could be like the idea of compound interest or whatever, right? It's like you get 1% better, you get 1% better. And actually over time.
It's exactly compound interest. It's exactly compound interest. Yeah. In fact, that's the analogy we use. We're making a lot of investments in improving our platform and foundations at Thrive Market. And that is exactly the analogy or metaphor rather that we use with the non-technical executive team is like, we are making investments and they will pay off, right? Like, and it's exactly compound interest, right?
Exactly.
And we need to make this investment now because we need the 10% per whatever to start accruing now as distinct from later. And yeah.
I love it. My final question, I know we're coming up on time. If you have one piece of advice for an engineering leader who's thinking about starting to get their organization to focus on MTTR, what would you recommend? Where do you recommend they start?
I don't think I have any different advice than the answer I gave earlier, which is make it visible.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, you asked, how do I get people to care about MTTR? It's like, how do I get people to care about X?
Yeah.
It's, and I'm not saying this just because you do measurement, but like measuring X and being transparent about X, like that is the way to do it. And when, again, you can get 80% of the way there simply with measuring and not manipulating or encouraging the behavior, if that makes any sense. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, now start to encourage the behaviors that you want. I think that's it. I mean, the other thing, if you're specifically asking about MTTR, it's having the owners of the service carry the pager for the service, right? So that's the other way. That's the other way to do it, which is, or the not the other way, the complementary way to do it, which is put the responsibility for the thing, let the benefits and the burdens run together. That's a legal term, but for the team that has the ability to influence the reliability of the service should have the responsibility and the accountability for driving that reliability.
You build it, you own it.
Yeah, which is exactly SRE, DevOps, you build it, you run it. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Randy, for joining me on the podcast. This was awesome. I had a great time.
Happy to be here. Thank you.